Tucker Carlson yesterday dropped an episode of his show which featured George Stephanopoulos' sister, who's a nun who lived for a long time in the Holy Land. And the conversation was focused on the plight of Christians in the Holy Land, what it is like from this nun's perspective, Mother Stephanopoulos, I suppose, to live as a Christian in the Holy Land. And it's gone massively viral. Saagar, this just on YouTube alone is already at 1 million views, and it's been up for about 24 hours and is definitely pinging around a lot in Christian circles. No surprise there. So let's just get a flavor of what this woman told Tucker Carlson. We can roll the first element here.
What does the yellow license plate mean?
Yellow plate is for people who live in the state of Israel, and they can go on certain roads, all roads, and for Palestinians who have a Jerusalem ID are allowed to have a car with a yellow plate. And then Palestinians have green and white plates, and they cannot use. So over that time that I've been here, as the settlements have grown, you build the infrastructure for it. The electricity, the roads, separate roads that are used only by people that have yellow plates. As a foreigner and part of a foreign church, we were entitled to have either those, or they also have white diplomatic and religious plates that are there. So there's very much an apartheid system.
So Mother Agapia Stephanopoulos is a Russian Orthodox nun, the sister of George Stephanopoulos. They talk a little bit in their interview, actually, about what it's been like for her brother, George Stephanopoulos, to get heat over the years as she shared her perspective, mostly about Israel, Saagar. So that's where this is causing already, predictable levels of controversy on the right, because she's very, very anti-Israel in this episode and throughout her whole career.
The episode consistently I found valuable because she's like, look, I'm a nun. I live in the Holy Land. Here is my daily interaction with the Muslim population. Here is what it's like being a nun in my Orthodox Christian community, in doing ministry, in going to these churches in Gaza, and generally observing what things are like. And what she is talking about, and the main criticism I've seen is that it's preposterous for Tucker to interview her about Christian destruction because Christianity is growing in Israel. But everyone then ignored that she's talking about the West Bank. And what she's talking about is the separate
Gaza as well, by the way.
And Gaza. And she's talking about the separate system and the war on these settlers on many of these communities, many of which are also Christian, and of the two-tiered, not even two-tiered system of justice. There's justice for one, and then there's not for other. And that's the part that is so annoying, is everybody, the Israeli defenders will say in one breath that the West Bank is in Israel, but that then they will cite the policies of the officially recognized Israel.
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, if you combine the two, things are a little bit different, no? It's like, Arab Israelis can vote in Israel. How does it work when she's talking about the yellow license plate?
Right.
And also, the settler thing is a much more urgent question today, because it used to actually be controversial in Israel. There were a lot of Israelis that were against it. There may still be. But it's part of the governing coalition now to not just support them, to arm them and to protect them with military force. It's almost certainly coming to Gaza very soon. So then the question of how do they act outside of currently recognized Israel, or what Israel calls itself Israel, and in greater Israel, well, that becomes the urgent question of that treatment, which she has now lived through for many years, and why I thought her perspective was very valuable. She also, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, it was just super interesting stuff. And it was a long conversation, so we have a selection of highlights. Do you want to get to this mainstream media?
This is important, because she talks about her brother who works at George Stephanopoulos, but more importantly, what she talks about is the way that mass media in the U.S. frames the issue in the conversation. Let's take a listen.
It's certainly a great problem right now. I mean, and even with this, we're dealing, now it's becoming a lot of publicity on the star, even though it is being distorted. I actually watched the news this morning, and James Stavridis is on, and he's talking about, it's all Hamas, and they show the emaciated hostage. And as if, everything would be okay if only Hamas would release the hostage, and that's the starvation. When it's taking place, millions of people are being starved. Babies are dying there, and we're focused, God, I hope the hostage gets freed. He should get freed. And he should get freed, and Israel should remove themselves from Gaza and allow the food to get in. And and Christians should be pushing for that. And I think we are seeing that to some degree now, but it's still obscuring the main point. Like I said, the unspoken thing when I talk to all my friends on the West Bank now is that they know we're next. that it's going to happen. And it will happen. Maybe we'll go back to that time where it'll be more like they play a long game. Even with this settlement building, we'll build. And then if America gives a little bit of pushback, okay, we stop for a while and then we start again. So maybe even in the West Bank for now.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that perspective is very valuable from her, again, as somebody who currently experiences so much of this stuff. And where she really kicked, I think, the hornet's nest was by claiming that Christian fundamentalist support for Israel is heresy. Now, I am not Christian, and I'm not going to get engaged in theological debates, but you tell me what the response to that was.
Well, let's roll the clip. This is going to be E3, and it's not surprising at all for a Russian Orthodox nun to make this point. We'll get into it on the back end. This is E3.
Just like many Jews are protesting and saying, not in our name, there has to be much more done by the Christians in America because these Christian Zionists are speaking in our name. Someone like Ted Cruz is saying and doing what he's doing because he's following a Christianity that is not the Christianity of the Holy Land.
We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel.
It's a heretical belief.
What is Christian Zionism?
Mm-hmm. It's sort of this cruel bargain they have going with Israel. Because basically what they say that they're going to be swooped up into heaven, right? And then there's going to be 1,000-year kingdom. And then there'll be the end of the world and the judgment by Christ, and he'll come back. This is a false, it was condemned as a heresy in 381, because basically there is no 1,000-year millennium to come. No 1,000-year period. We are in that time period now. It's a false belief there.
So basically what they're arguing is that Jesus coming the first time wasn't enough?
Yeah. And it's like, in a way, it's denying the Messiah.
So
all right, tell me what's going on.
So we don't have to get into the whole premillennial dispensationalist thing again, but that's basically what she's talking about. Ryan and I talked about it extensively in our Red Heifer segment that Ryan reported out last week, and we've talked about before too. But the idea that there's a rapture, and then it's mostly evangelicals. Now, as an evangelical, you hear sometimes those arguments made, and I would say it was probably the case in that interview that comes across as just anti-Protestant, which is still sensitive. I don't take any offense to that. I think it did sound sort of anti-Protestant, but to say it's a heresy, to me, is, as much as I disagree with it and think it's dangerous, this is a semantic conversation. It's just a bad interpretation, and it's I think a thin interpretation to base your foreign policy on. It's not a crazy interpretation of Scripture. It's just, in many cases, a very literal interpretation of Scripture. So I wouldn't go so far as to call it a heresy, but she did call it a heresy. Which,
but that's consistent with their belief.
She's Russian Orthodox.
She cited some.
Yeah, of course.
Again, this is like, my experience with this is like the Da Vinci Code, but like talking about, she was like, in 350 AD they declared it. I'm like,
381.
Okay, sure, whatever. I'll take your word for it.
Well, she's Russian Orthodox. Yeah, she's not a Protestant, so it's not offensive. But I think most people would say it's not so much heretical. It's not Gnosticism, but it's a very literal interpretation, and it's thin gruel for your foreign policy, which is a very fair point.
Yes.
Like the Red Heifer segment we had last week. It's just to base your foreign policy around this, as ostensibly Mike Huckabee and Mike Johnson and Ted Cruz do. That's really a serious problem. And I think that's probably what's most offensive, is not calling it a heresy, because that's more semantic. I mean, premillennial dispensationalists know that they're a lot of people disagree with them and think that they're bananas. But I think what's more offensive is this idea that your lifelong support for the Israeli state, the Israeli government, political Israel, I think it's a more sensitive topic because it hits a live wire. For a lot of people, that's, you kind of look around and you realize, guess some of this maybe was wrong.
Yeah,
that's why it's so sensitive.
I would hope so. Let's do E4 as well. I think
Hamas. This is what was most. Yeah, this seemed to be the most controversial.
This is what people got upset about. Yeah. All right, let's take a listen.
I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with Hamas, or know people who are, right? Are they religious fanatics? Are they jihadis?
Not the people that I know. Like I said, when I was again in at the school, we had a couple teachers, Muslim men, and there were some elections going on. And it wasn't Hamas then. It was the Social Party or something. But it was definitely a Muslim religious party. I would have voted for those guys because they weren't corrupt. They wanted to serve their people, and that's what it was about. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere. I'm not totally ingrained in the community, but the vibe there isn't one of wanting everybody to convert to Islam and forcing it upon them at all. And the purpose of Hamas is primarily to resist and to protect their people and their land.
And she's a bit cagey when Tucker asks if you can proselytize, and she says, we don't really do that because we're Orthodox. It's not part of our faith. But Saagar, again, important point that a lot of people do want to gloss over. Hamas is not exactly the same as ISIS, right? Like there are distinctions between one and the other.
Organization.
Yeah, it's a political organization. They're very, I guess you can call ISIS one too, but they're very meaningful distinctions. It doesn't mean one is great. It means that it's different.
Yeah, I mean, the take I saw was that she's reluctant to say it because then she couldn't be able to go back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess I'll take her word for it. Like, I would probably want to say you could ask like other people who are Christian in, let's say, Gaza and or in the West Bank about their general experience, because those are the ones ultimately you have to deal, with the population. Yeah. I did think what was kind of interesting talking or listening to her was just about the Islamic and Christian communities who live side by side there.
Yes.
And she did not make it seem as if it was the Muslim population that was driving them out. She much more laid the blame at Israel. I don't know if that is to be true.
It is.
It is just interesting, though, to hear her say that. And I was like, well, I'm assuming what incentive do you have for a Christian leader to not to say the otherwise?
Well, so I think it's very obviously true when you're talking about some of these sites. And she makes a really interesting argument about Jacob's Well and other sites in the West Bank, where for Muslims, these sites, or actually, here's an even better example, some of the sites where, so Jesus' birthplace.
Yeah,
those are
Bethlehem,
really,
yeah.
Those are actually also important sites to Muslims because obviously they incorporate Jesus into Islam and always have. And so they have incentives to protect these holy sites for Christians in the same way that Christians have incentives to protect their holy sites. But if you are Israel, what incentive do you have to protect a site that has to do with Jesus, who you believe was a false Messiah? So from that perspective of just purely preserving the history, there's obviously, like the Venn diagram has an overlap on the question of like holy sites for people who believe in Jesus Christ. So I thought that point was interesting. She's basically saying there's a real risk with settlements and such of these holy sites being completely obliterated because the Israelis may have reason to preserve Jacob's Well, but what reason do they have to preserve Christian, like Christ-centered holy sites? Not really much at all. And it's a legitimate risk. But yeah, the Hamas stuff, did it sound like she maybe was a little tense? Yes.
She was like they're defending their people. I was like, wow. I mean, theoretically, I guess, technically true. Maybe she has her own incentive. She probably, if I had to guess, is just one who's so horrified by Israel that she doesn't want to fall into any trap. Which I actually do
think
get.
That's right.
I do understand that.
She did not want to make it sound like by criticizing Hamas.
Right.
And you can take issue with this argument. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She didn't want to fall into, you called it a trap. I think it's exactly right. That was my interpretation.
It's like the Piers Morgan, like, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? And by the way, she was like, yes, the hostage should be released. Anyway, interesting convo. I'm glad that I at least got your perspective on it. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.